If you've ever found yourself wandering around downtown Miami, you've probably passed by it without even realizing the weight it carries. Right across from Bayside Marketplace, where tourists haggle over cigars and cheap Miami souvenirs, you'll see a tall Mediterranean-style tower rising like a sentinel of memory. That, my friends, is the Freedom Tower. Now, to the untrained eye, it might just look like an old, fancy building squeezed between a parking garage and a condo development. But this place, it's basically Miami's version of Ellis, only with more guayaberas and way more drama. Welcome to Tales from the 305. I'm your host, Jay Marquez, and today we're talking about freedom, flights, and the stubborn resilience of Miami's Cuban soul. Let's rewind the tape to 1925. The Roaring Twenties were in full swing. Miami was booming thanks to snowbirds, bootleggers, and real estate hustlers. The Miami Daily News decided it needed a headquarters that screamed legit. So they hired Schultze and Weaver, the same architects behind the Waldorf Astoria in New York, to build a 17-story Spanish Renaissance skyscraper that would tower over Biscayne Boulevard. It worked. The Freedom Tower, though it wasn't called that yet, became one of the tallest buildings in the South. On its opening night, a spotlight beamed from its rooftop all the way up into the clouds like a beacon of ambition. But the building's real legacy wouldn't begin until almost 4 decades later. Fast forward to January 1st, 1959. New Year's Day. Fidel Castro takes power in Cuba, and what started out as a revolution against a dictatorship quickly turns into a communist regime. Property is seized, dissent is crushed, schools and churches are overtaken, and thousands of Cubans, teachers, doctors, bakers, jazz musicians, realize that it's time to leave everything behind. Over the next decade and a half, Miami becomes the front line of a humanitarian crisis. That's when the old newspaper tower gets a new name and a new purpose. From 1962 to 1974, the Freedom Tower became the heart of the Cuban Refugee Assistance Program. It was here that newly arrived Cubans were registered, medically examined, and connected to housing, jobs, schools, and support services. One refugee called it a lighthouse in the fog. And honestly, that about hits the mark. One of those Cuban refugees recalls, "I came with my parents and my older brother on a freedom flight in 1967. I remember standing in line outside the big building, clutching my brother's hands so tight. We had 2 suitcases and no idea what came next. But once inside the huge, cavernous hall, there were people who spoke Spanish, who smiled at us. I remember being given a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and a cup of milk. It's funny what you remember. That sandwich, it tasted like a new beginning." Those freedom flights were a game changer. Between 1965 and 1973, more than 260,000 Cubans arrived in Miami on daily flights organized by the U.S. government, an unprecedented airlift for a refugee population. Most landed at Miami International Airport and were directed downtown to the Freedom Tower. At its peak, the Cuban Refugee Assistance Program helped more than 300,000 Cubans with everything from English classes to job training to setting up home in unfamiliar cities like Union City, New Jersey, Miami, or, well, Hialeah. The program wasn't perfect, but it was vast, and it changed the face of South Florida forever. So what happened to the building after all that? Well, after the refugee processing ended, the tower fell into disrepair. There were talks of demolition, but in 1997, the family of Jorge Mascanosa, one of the most influential Cuban-American leaders, bought the building and saved it. In 2005, they donated it to Miami-Dade College. Today, it's a museum, an art space, and a National Historic Landmark. The Freedom Tower is no longer processing arrivals, but is still processing meaning. It stands as a monument to exile, hope, and Miami's ever-pulsing immigrant heart. So next time you're sipping a mojito at Bayside, look across the street. That golden tower with the terracotta roof? That's not just a pretty building. That's where thousands of lives began again. That's where freedom touched down in Miami. And that little boy with the peanut butter and jelly sandwich? That was me. I'm Jay Marquez, and this has been Tales from the 305. Stay weird, Stay proud and stay away from the tourists at Bayside.